who traces existence, whose only son, all creatures caught in the prison of samsara, confused in the darkness of their ignorance, overwhelmed by their suffering. You, whose drunken paths proclamation of the Dharma arises under the stupor of delusions and frees us from the iron chains of our whose powerful sword of wisdom shews down suffering wherever its brows appear, clearing away the darkness of our ignorance. Ein Churchu Manjurshu, princely body is adorned with the 112 marks of a Buddha, who has completed it and is achieving the highest perfection of a Bodhisattva, who has been pure from the beginning. O Manjushri, O loving one, with the brilliance of your wisdom, illuminated darkness and closing my mind, enlighten my intelligence and wisdom, so I may gain insight into Buddha's words and text and explain them. And for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and highest assembly, and relations that gather into the teachings may I attain the state of a Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest assembly. From the accumulations that I collect by listening to the teachings, may I attain the state of a Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest assembly. From the accumulations that I collect by listening to the teachings, may I attain the state of a Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. All right. I'm having a weird day, just to let you know. It's an excellent day for trying to practice patience, because it seems that kind of from morning and up until now, things happen. So anyway, not really bad things, not bad things at all, but just things. So what are we on? We're on patience. So we started chapter number 6 a couple of weeks ago. We had only 2 weeks break, and it seems like, at least in my mind, it seems like 2 years break. So it took me some time yesterday to get back to where we're at. I woke up this morning and I was again totally in a different space, different place. So we're looking at the chapter on patience, chapter number 6. We've covered about 10 verses. I think that we had covered about 10 verses before the beginning of this module. So I thought of today just quickly running through what we've covered previously, so that we'll have a good basis for that we can use for covering what Geshe-la said today. So let's start with that. What I tried to do is to come up with a brief, sorry, not this. So before I get to the outline, this chapter has lots of verses, 100 and something verses, and also very extensive outline. So what I tried to do was to come up with a contracted outline so that we can just look at a general way of practicing patience. So I thought I had it sorted, but then at home towards the end of my preparation, it got completely jumbled. So we'll look at some parts of it today and some parts of it tomorrow. It's an excellent way of looking at how to cultivate patience, because there are so many verses in this chapter, and what Shantideva does is quite interesting. So we know that there are 3 types of patience, right? We've mentioned them before. Patience of disregarding harm that was done to you, paying no heed to harm. Patience that willingly accepts suffering that arises in our continuum, and patience of being certain about the Dharma. Those are the 3 types of patience. So Shantideva here doesn't explain them necessarily in one go, in the sense that it's not that in chapter number 6, it first of all covers patience that pays no heed to harm that was done to you in one go, and having finished that, he goes into patience that willingly accepts suffering. He doesn't do that. He presents different scenarios, and it says, in that scenario, this is how you practice patience that willingly accept suffering. This is how you practice patience, that there is no heed to harm that was done to you. This is how you practice patience of being certain about the Dhamma. Let's look at another case. In this particular scenario, this is how you practice patience of being certain about the Dhamma. This is how you practice patience of willingly accepting suffering, right? So since this is the way that Shantideva explains that, not all in one go, but according to different cases, it's hard to keep track. So for that reason, I thought that it's good to have just a brief outline in front of us. And then once you kind of have that brief outline in your mind, and you know that you're experiencing this scenario, so you can kind of go to the text or go to the drawers in your mind, to the pigeons hole in your mind, and kind of retrieve all the techniques for applying patience in that particular situation. And then when another scenario arises, then you can pull out all the information that you have with respect to other scenario. It can work better. It's quite hard to keep in mind all the advice that Shantideva gives with respect to the way to practice patience, although saying that it is hard does not mean to say that we shouldn't do that. I mean, we should definitely have the way to practice patience at the tip of our fingers, because I think that probably on a daily basis, we encounter situations where there are quite a lot of opportunities for practicing patience. Even when we're alone at home, there's still opportunities for practicing patience. So without saying too much about it, let's just recap what we said in the previous week, or in the previous module, sorry. So we started with looking at the disadvantages of anger. In verse number 1, do you remember what was the main point in verse number 1? One moment of anger destroys roots of virtues that have been accumulated over thousands of eons with great effort, right? That you have worked so hard. So that's the unseen disadvantage of anger. Why is it unseen? Yeah. Yeah, we can't see our mental continuum. We can't see the way that we can't see the way that roots of virtue are being destroyed. Only a Buddha can, yeah. And then we go into the sin disadvantages of anger, which are quite visible. Like you're made unhappy, your friends are made unhappy, and so forth. So let's look at that. So the visible advantages of anger. It eliminates opportunity for physical and mental pleasure, and anger causes to destroy dear friendships and so forth. So we had 2.5 verses in this section. Let's briefly look at them. So my mind will not experience peace if it holds painful thoughts of hatred. I shall find no joy or happiness. Unable to sleep, I shall feel unsettled. A master who is hatred is in danger of being killed, even by those who, for their wealth and honor, dependent upon his kindness. By it, friends and relatives are disheartened. Though done by his generosity, they will not rely upon him. Those are the sin advantages of anger. And in brief, it summarizes that there is nobody who dwells comfortably with anger. We all know that based upon our experience, I reckon. So, so we looked at the disadvantages of anger, and there are two lines that explain the benefits of patience. Let's just briefly look at them. But whoever seriously overcomes it creates happiness in this and other lives. So that we looked at the disadvantages of anger, the benefits of patience, and then we started to look at engaging the mind in the methods for accomplishing patience. So first off, we had an explanation of the nature of the cause along with the disadvantages in verse number 7, which is, I think, this is a crucial point. So I thought of And I think that we had a discussion about it in the previous module. Having found this fuel of mental unhappiness in the doing of what I do not wish for, in the hindering of what I wish for, hatred develops and then destroys me. So, what is the cause of anger? Mental unhappiness, right? So, just I wanted to just maybe expand on that. What is the root of the afflictions? Ignorance. So ignorance is the root of anger or hatred. So if I were to formulate the following syllogism, it follows that mental unhappiness is not the cause of anger because ignorance is the cause of anger. Why? Like ignorance of grasping at the self. So
we think our problems are stemming from ourselves, don't we?
Happy birthday, Graham.
Thanks, Zakat.
You look a day
older.
A day no older than 90. Not a day older than 90. Happy birthday.
Thank you. I feel about a day older than 90 too.
So here it says that the fuel of anger, the cause of anger is unhappiness, whereas we say that the root of anger is ignorance. So how do you then reconcile these two statements?
Well, I don't think that mental unhappiness is only caused by hatred.
That mental unhappiness is only caused by hatred.
Or only causes hatred.
Only causes hatred.
Yeah.
So first of all, you said that mental unhappiness does not necessarily cause only hatred. It can also cause other things.
Yeah, like despondency.
Like despondency.
I think hatred is like has a lot of energy behind it, whereas mental unhappiness you can always be despondent, which has no energy behind it whatsoever.
Other ideas?
Mental unhappiness is a result of disturbance, mental disturbance.
So mental unhappiness is a result of mental disturbance.
And there are many mental disturbances.
And there are many mental disturbances.
Yes, and I put that in between ignorance, then you get mental disturbance, and then you get mental unhappiness bit. So
Yeah, I would go like that. I mean, it's not that I disagree with what you said, but it seems that if you're looking for the root cause of anger, it is ignorance. So what is the process when you look at the evolution of the afflictions, and in the Lamrim Chemo and also in the Illumination of the Thought in Chandrakirti's commentary, in Chandrakirti's text, the supplement to the Middle Way, there's a section that explains the way in which the afflictions arise. So it begins with ignorance. It begins with ignorance, and just a second, I'll close down. It begins with ignorance, and from ignorance arises an incorrect mental attention, right? So ignorance of grasping the self. It believes that phenomena exist objectively in and of themselves. And then we pay incorrect mental attention that exaggerates either positive qualities or negative qualities. You can say that the flip side of it either denies positive qualities or it denies negative qualities. If you exaggerate positive qualities, it seems that you also will deny negative qualities. If you exaggerate negative qualities, you can't see positive qualities, right? So you deny them in that sense. So we have incorrect mental attention that arises because of ignorance. And then you can say that this is where mental unhappiness can arise. So mental unhappiness, mental disturbance is in the text explained to be the same scenario. So in English, we do say that there is mental disturbance and mental unhappiness. Also in Tibetan, there are two words for that. So when your mind is unhappy, your mind is disturbed. And then that can cause anger. All right, so going back to my original question, how do you reconcile two causes of anger? One, you could say that is more immediate cause of anger. It is in closer proximity to anger. That's mental unhappiness. And the root cause of anger is ignorance. All right? Eva is saying also ignorance causes unhappiness, which in turn causes anger. Yeah, exactly. So then there are two scenarios that Shantideva mentions here for mental unhappiness. Two scenarios in which it arises. Do you remember what they are? Why in the text itself? In verse number 7.
Not getting what you want, getting what you don't want.
Yeah, exactly. Not getting what you want, getting what you do not want. Or it's like Shantideva says, when something hinders what you want, which is another way of saying that you don't get what you want. So when you don't get what you want, or when you get what you do not want, your mind is unhappy. Next step could be anger. Matt is asking, couldn't you say a lack of renunciation causes unhappiness? Well, a lack of renunciation means that so long as you're not determined to emerge from cyclic existence, you could say that you're still attracted to the pleasantries or to the excellence, to the perfections of cyclic existence. So long as you are attracted to the excellent features of cyclic existence for that long, you will become disappointed. You will still remain disappointed when you don't get what you want, or when you will get what you do not want. Yeah, so you could say that a lack of renunciation, meaning that you don't see faults in samsara. Not only you don't see faults in samsara, you're attracted to samsara. For that long, you will still have unhappiness. I mean, part of the problems is that we try to fix samsara. We try to kind of make samsara work for us, whereas no, it's not that it's going to work. It's not that it's going to work out in terms of bringing us lasting happiness.
Yeah, we still expect samsara to make us happy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I think it's an interesting point because often I kind of find that rather than trying to break free from samsara, I'm trying to fix it. You know, I'm trying to kind of see whether I can change my situation within samsara so that I will get what I want. You know, as if you can really get what you want in samsara. Yeah, so it's a really good point, I think.
It is the opposite view that samsara doesn't create our happiness, and samsara in fact is the cause of all our suffering, is can fuel a depressed mind. In a sense, what's the point? Why bother? It's only unless you have faith in the unseen conditions. Is there any hope? That's why I think as Buddhists that we do have or as any spiritual tradition, you have the advantage of people with no spirituality, because there's just this underlying expectation that living in samsara will bring us happiness. You just got to go to the next. People's lives are sort of, based on chasing the next event. It's going to make you happy. And before it makes you unhappy, you then go up to the next event. It will make you happy. You don't hang around long enough to experiencing the suffering and change.
I mean, for that, we need to understand samsara. We need to understand what samsara is, in the sense that once you understand that samsara is taking rebirth influence of karma and afflictions, and so long as you have the contamination of karma and afflictions for that long, there would be no long-lasting happiness. When you understand it, I think, in this way, you don't get that depressed about it. Of course, the situation in samsara is quite gloomy, in that we do experience a lot of suffering, but the understanding of what samsara means, which is birth under the control of karma and afflictions, also implies that you understand that there is a way to break free from karma and afflictions. You don't need to understand what afflictions are, what karma is, which, since that it implies that you have some understanding then of that if ignorance is, for example, an erroneous state of mind, and that is the root of the affliction, and this is the root of samsara, then you already see a possibility of breaking free from samsara. So yeah, so we think of, if you think of the suffering of samsara, you can get depressed, but actually think that if you understand it deeply, in that what samsara is, then together with that, you see also a possibility of breaking free from samsara.
Well, by understanding it deeply, the only the logical outcome of that is renunciation.
Yeah.
A heartfelt, deep renunciation that there is nothing else we should be doing except practice the Dharma. You know, and as we all know.
I guess that what I'm trying to say is that you can meditate on suffering. You can meditate on suffering of suffering and suffering of change. You can meditate on the suffering of the 6 rounds of existence. But if you just stop with that and you don't really meditate on what is the actual meaning of samsara, you just meditate on the suffering of samsara, which is, you can say, an outcome, but you don't meditate on samsara being created by cause and conditions through the 12 links of dependent arising. If you don't do that, there is a possibility that you get distressed, despondent, and so forth. But if you do, if you extend your meditation to also meditate on the samsaric process by which, through karma and afflictions, you're born again and again in samsara, then you also see that there is actually a possibility of emerging from samsara. So meditating on suffering is a cause for renunciation, for that determination to emerge from samsara. But also, when you look at how Lama Tsongkhapa explains that in his Lamrim Chemo, he says that there are 2 meditations that you do in the medium scope. One of them is meditation on suffering within the framework of the 4 Noble Truths. And the second meditation is on the 12 links of dependent arising. So if you understand not only is the presentation of suffering, but also the 12 links of dependent arising, then your way of developing renunciation, the determination to leave samsara, becomes more complete. All right. So the 2 scenarios or avenues that Shantideva explains for mental unhappiness: not getting what you want, getting what you do not want. So the following explanation in his chapter on patience follows those 2 points. How do you cultivate patience? You rest anger with respect to not getting what you want. You rest anger with respect to getting what you do not want. What is it, the thing that you don't want? Well, there are things that you don't want for yourself or for your enemy, yourself or your close ones, the people that are close to your heart. What are the things that you do not want? Well, you don't want suffering and so forth. Actually, those are the objects of anger. So we'll look at that in a second. But let's look again. It's verse 7. Having found its fuel of mental unhappiness in the doing of what I do not wish for, and in the hindering of what I wish for, right? So not getting what you want or getting what you do not want, hatred develops and then destroys me. Right? So this is a really important verse. Therefore, I should totally destroy the fuel of this enemy. This enemy has no other function than that of causing me harm. So actually, I wanted also to read through the short paragraph that Kempo Kumpel explained in relation to that in this book. So it says in page 200, everything that produces uncomfortable and unwanted situations, such as the loss of possessions, both for oneself and our sphere of interest, and all that is a hindrance to getting what we want in terms of property and well-being, all these produce a state of mental annoyance. And this is the fuel for anger and hatred. For just as it is food that makes the body grow, it is unhappiness of mind that gives rise to anger and resentment. And anger it is that lies and ruins every kind of mental goodness. Thus, it is essential to overcome such states of unhappiness, for they are the food on which anger feeds. So this is really, really important, because we normally speak of the antidote to anger as being patience, right? But it seems that here you can say that the antidote to anger could be applied even before anger arises. At a time in which mental unhappiness is present, when you find that your mind is annoyed, it is disturbed, there's that disquieting state of mind, your mind is edgy. We have so many words in English to describe that mental unhappiness, right? So it's discomfort, uncomfortable, being on edge, being disturbed, being unhappy, and so forth. When you recognize that, you can think that that is the breeding ground for anger. This is where I need to cultivate patience. And a lot of explanation on patience is actually addressing that state of being unhappy. So rather than looking at situation where you are already angry, you want to put a stop to anger even before it arises, when your mind is unhappy. So Shantideva's explanation in most cases is dealing with that mental unhappiness, mental disturbance. Of course, you can also do the same thing when anger arises, but I think that when anger is already there, it is much more difficult to put a stop to it. Right? When anger is already there, and we know based upon a personal experience how heavy and energetic, powerful anger is, if it is already there, it is, in some sense, you can say that it's a little bit too late. It's also, once you get used to this material, find yourself in different situations where your mind is upset, right? We use also the word in English, upset. Does upset mean that you're angry? Would you say that being upset is the same as being angry? Since that upset kind of fits into the group of states which are unhappiness, mental disturbance, your mind is unsettled, your mind is annoyed, right? So when you find that you're upset, when you get used to this material, then you can you can hold off for a second, hold on and say, this is where anger can arise. You know, this is a dangerous situation. This is what I need to address. So, continuing with that. So the nature of the cause along with its disadvantages, we covered that, verse 7. Then instructions on making effort in the methods for overcoming anger in verse 8. We read through that briefly. Let's do that again. Therefore, I should totally destroy the fuel of this enemy. This enemy has no other function than that of causing me harm. Today we started with verse 9 that came under the section of the actual method for overcoming it. It is unreasonable to nurture displeasure, and the reason for that. Verse 10 is probably one of the verses that is probably one of the most quoted verses all over in many different types of teaching. So whatever befalls me, I shall not disturb my mental joy. Having been made unhappy, I shall not accomplish that what I wish for, and my virtue will decline. That's 9. Yeah, and then verse 10, why be unhappy about something if it cannot be remedied? If it can be remedied. And what is the use of being unhappy about something if it cannot be remedied? think that many years ago when Geshe was here, and he taught this text, he said that many people are looking for practices and recitations to help with certain situations. And he said that rather than looking for different practices, just memorize this verse. And then you can apply it to any situation that you encounter. If I can do something about it, why am I unhappy? There's nothing that I can do about the situation. What's the use of being unhappy? And he said that if you memorize it and you say it 100 times, it will be more beneficial than saying a whole lot of other recitations. So I think that it's a good advice. So we've covered these two. And then we began today with point D, which is having examined in detail the causes that give rise to anger, making effort to abandon them. So most of the chapter's material comes under point D. The way to practice patience comes under this section. So we begin with a general presentation of the divisions of anger in terms of the objects that give rise to anger. Let's look at that. For myself and for my friends, I do not want suffering, contempt, harsh words, and unpleasant talk. But for my enemies, it is the opposite. So, again, we're looking at how anger arises. So we said that anger arises from mental unhappiness, right? And mental unhappiness arises from getting what you do not want and not getting what you want. We connected with verse 11 that speaks again of the objects that give rise to anger. So for myself and my friends, I do not want suffering, right? So when I get what I do not want, suffering, contempt, harsh words, and unpleasant talk. But for my enemies, it is the opposite. So then we have here 4 things that we want for ourselves and our friends. So 4 things that we do not want. Suffering, contempt, harsh words, and unpleasant talk. Unpleasant talk is explained in Khenpo Kumpen's commentary to be unpleasant rumors, for example, about you that undermine your reputation. So if there are somebody spreading rumors about you, they undermine you in one way or another. This is what you do not want. That causes mental unhappiness. So for my enemies, it is the opposite. So what does it mean? What are the things that we want for our enemies? What is the opposite of suffering? That's happiness, right? So we become upset when our enemies get what they want, when they get the happiness that they want. What is the opposite of contempt, would you say? Good reputation. Yeah, when they're being venerated, good reputation, when they're being respected and so forth. What is the opposite of harsh words? Kind words. Yeah, when someone speaks pleasantly, with a lot of respect, praising our enemies in their face. So we dislike that. And also unpleasant talk. So you can say that you can also spread rumors, so to speak, that boost up the reputation of, or someone can spread rumors that boost up the reputation of a person that you dislike, right? So suppose that, actually this is quite a nice example. Tibetans in general lack a sense of discrimination with respect to politics. It's more like if his owner says that, for example, George Bush is a nice person, Tibetans would go out and vote for Bush. If he said that Trump is a nice person, regardless of his policies, they would go out and vote for Trump. So if, for example, I would say here in this room that Trump is such an amazing person. He's doing so much for the economy of the US. And not only that, in the opposition that he put together, that he put up with China is really kind of standing up to China. So altogether, his policies are excellent. Do you feel a bit of resistance to that?
Yes.
So, if someone, I think that's probably in kind of spreading those pleasant remarks about someone that you dislike. It makes you uncomfortable, makes you unhappy, it causes some mental disturbance. So Matt is saying verse 11 seems to refer to 8 worldly concerns but doesn't include gain or loss. Yeah. No. So we have with the 8 worldly concern, and this is, I think that we also encountered that in the commentary. There was a comment with respect to that in the commentary. So liking gain, disliking no gain, liking happiness, disliking suffering, liking praise, disliking blame, liking fame, disliking infamy or bad reputation. So it doesn't include gain or loss, but you can say that maybe it does.
Suffering.
Yeah, suffering and happiness. Maybe it's included within that. So Kempo Kumpa's explanation of this section, I think, is clearer with respect to how you tie together those 4 objects that give rise to anger with the 2 avenues for getting for mental unhappiness and getting what you want. Not getting what you want, getting what you do not want. So Kempo Kumpa says that basically there are 24 situations in which you become unhappy. Of course, you can say that there could be many more situations. I think that this is just a general presentation. There, of course, could be many different situations where you become unhappy. But altogether, when we look at those 24, there are 2 sets of 12. There are 2 sets of 12 that pertain to, one, getting what you do not want. On the other hand, not getting what you want, getting what you do not want. So what are the things that you do not want? Well, we do not want suffering for ourselves. We do not want contempt for ourselves. We do not want harsh words to ourselves, and we don't want someone circulating bad rumors about us. These are 4. Also, we do not wish for the same thing with respect to those who are close to our heart. Not only close to our heart, you can say that our benefactors, those that we have some invested interest with. So we do not want them to suffer. We do not want them to be treated with a sense of contempt. We do not want them to be criticized or to have harsh words to be used with respect to them. And also, we do not want rumors to be spreading around them or about them, right? So far we have 8. Then also with respect to our enemies, we do not want our enemies to be happy. We do not want our enemies to be respected, to be venerated, to, for people to think that our enemies are wonderful people. We do not want them to be spoken to in a nice way, in a kind way. We do not want conversations or a general consensus around them to be as such that everyone would conceive them to be excellent people or wonderful people. We actually want quite the opposite, right? With respect to our enemies. So these are 12. Right? So 4 with respect to ourselves, 4 with respect to those who are close to our heart. And the opposite of these, 4 with respect to our enemies. Now you can then take this and apply it in the opposite way to what we want. So what are the things that we want? We want happiness for ourselves. We want a sense of respect for ourselves. We want to be spoken to kindly, and we want to have good reputation in general, to be praised. Also, we want those who are close to our heart, we want them to be happy. We want them to be respected. We want them to be spoken to in a kind way. And also, we want them in general to have good reputation. What is the thing that we want for our enemies? This is quite harsh. We want them to suffer. Sounds quite cruel, doesn't it? But I think that kind of, you can understand suffering in a variety of ways. Not necessarily painful suffering, but in some sense, you want them to be unsuccessful, not get what they want. So we want suffering for them. We want them to have bad reputation. We want them to be put on the spot or to put in their place. To, in that sense, to be spoken to in a harsh way. We want them to have bad reputation. Matt is saying, I think there is a recent commentary allows wishing failure for Trump. Yeah, well, I think that probably wishing him to fail the US election is not.
It's not rejoicing in his failure, but maybe.
Yeah, it's wishing others to be saved by his disastrous policies.
Really, really rejoicing in someone else's success and just.
Yeah.
Or no, just wishing for the welfare of people.
Yeah, when you understand I guess the disastrous effects that others might have and how detrimental they are, you want them to be unsuccessful. So I think that rather than being vengeful or wanting them to suffer, it's more like you wish them to not continue to inflict harm upon others. So I also included that with my tutorial notes, which are somewhere. Let's see. So, objects that give rise to suffering. Getting what I want. When I or my friend getting what I do not want. So when I or my friends get suffering, contempt, harsh words, and unpleasant remarks. And also what I do not want is when my enemies get the opposite of this: happiness, admiration, being talked to in a nice and pleasant way, and good reputation or pleasant comments that are made about them. Hindering what I want or not getting what I want. So when you don't get happiness, admiration, being talked to in a nice way, and good reputation, you get unhappy. Or when your enemies do not get suffering, contempt, harsh words, and unpleasant remarks or talk, then you're made unhappy. So that's quite clear. Can you find other points that are outside of these 4 objects that give rise to anger, which still are avenues for getting angry? Environmental.
I think what came up in the discussion group was about, that sort of, just like animal cruelty. Cruelty.
Well, animal cruelty.
Yeah.
Well, I guess what I'm asking is that list an exhaustive list of the objects that give rise to anger? So if you say that, for example, animal cruelty, if I say that animal cruelty means that animals experience suffering, right? So you become unhappy when those who are close to your heart experience suffering. So you can say that that's included within that list. Can we find other things which are not included in that list? It doesn't seem to me to be an exhaustive list. the environment.
They're not beings, but they are
We care about the environment because we care about beings.
Mm.
I mean, just the word suffering pretty much covers everything.
Yeah, just the word suffering covers everything. Yeah, it's more like bang, that's the fault of samsara. Of course, we are made unhappy with samsara.
And that's why we don't want it to happen. Because of suffering.
Mm.
Why we don't want anything.
I mean, the Tibetan way is to unpack things to the nth degree.
Yeah,
So
lists.
in that degree, there is a lot more.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, it's not a major point. I was just wondering about it. So we spoke about the divisions of anger in terms of the objects that give rise to anger. Then, following that, we have arresting fury towards that which brings unwanted things. So here, it starts to deal with the two avenues of mental unhappiness. Getting what you do not want, so arresting fury towards that which brings unwanted things. And the next point would be arresting fury towards that which hinders your desire, right? So these are the two ways in which Shantideva here explains how to practice patience. It says, you practice patience with respect to not getting what you want and getting what you do not want. This is the main twofold division. Although in this section we have 3 points, the first point was just a general presentation of the objects of anger that give rise to anger. Altogether, you can say 24 scenarios, or this abridged presentation of Shantideva. And then the rest is an explanation of how to practice patience. You practice patience when you do not get what you want, you get what you do not want. So these are the first major division. Then arresting fury towards that which brings unwanted things, right? When you get what you do not want. So you arrest anger towards those who wrong you. That's point A. Well, there's a lot of scrolling up and down. So that's a good point in time to look at the contracted, abbreviated outline. So arresting wrath towards that which brings unwanted things. So we have 3 points here. Arresting anger or fury towards those who wrong you. Then arresting fury or wrath towards those who wrong those due to yourself, to your heart. And then arresting wrath towards those who are done well by your enemies, which is similar to what we said in verse 11, right? So you get angry when you and your friends, those who are close to your heart, get what you do not want. Suffering, contempt, harsh words, and unpleasant remarks. Or when your enemies are getting the opposite of them. So it follows the same structure. You arrest wrath with respect to those who wrong you, those who wrong those who are dear to your heart, and those who are done well by your enemies. Looking at the first point, arresting wrath towards those who wrong you, there are 2 points: being patient with those who would create suffering for you, and being patient with those who would mistreat you and so forth. So in the first point, being patient with those who would create suffering for you, Shantideva explains 3 kinds of patience. So of course the outline becomes very extensive. But I just wanted to look at the outline in general to see how Shantideva slots in the different types of patience in relation to one scenario. So when you find people that create suffering for you, and suffering is what you do not want, You practice patience that willingly accepts suffering. You practice patience of certitude about the Dhamma. You practice patience that disregards harm that was done to you. Point B is a resting breath towards those wrong those did to yourself. So you can put a stop to it by means of patience that is intent on the Dhamma. Put a stop to it by patience that disregards harm done. Then you also put a stop to unhappiness and to anger. In those situations where your enemies get what you do not want for them, right? So they get happiness, they get praise, they get good reputation, they are spoken to kindly. So you also arrest mental unhappiness and anger in those situations.
Is this condensed outline on Dropbox or?
It will be tonight. Yeah, it will be tonight. All right. What else did we cover today? Let's look at that. So we started to look at cultivating patience that willingly accepts suffering. One point that I wanted to make with respect to reflecting on the benefits of meditating on suffering, we'll cover that, I think, later on in this chapter, but Lama Tsongkhapa then says that, sorry, not Lama Tsongkhapa, Shantideva says that also further on there are benefits to suffering. Because of suffering, you can develop renunciation. You shun negative actions. You develop compassion. You dispel haughtiness. It speaks about 5 benefits of suffering. Anyway, it's a verse that will come up later on in the text, and Lama Tsongkhapa in the Lamrim Chemo has an explanation of these 5 benefits of suffering. And also he has another short text in which he gave an explanation of mind training, of willingly accepting suffering, how you transform suffering into conditions that are conducive to the path, in which he says that from suffering you become more determined, you go for refuge, you develop compassion to others, you dispel haughtiness. So that's I think that's another answer to Matt's question.
Resilience and perseverance.
Sorry?
Resilience and perseverance.
Yeah, resilience and perseverance. Yeah, you become more determined to emerge from samsara, do more, practice more.
And also understanding the nature of reality, the emptiness of the world too, that sort of benefit.
I think it's 621.
621. Oh, there you go. Furthermore, suffering has good qualities. Through being disheartened with it, arrogance is dispelled. Compassion arises for those in cyclic existence, negativities are shunned, and joy is found in virtue. Yeah, so Lama Tsongkhapa in the Lamrim Chemo explains that to a greater degree, and then there is another text, separate text, a short text by Lama Tsongkhapa, in which he explains how to use suffering as conditions for progressing along the steps of the path. What was the other text? I have it on my computer. I will also put that on the Dropbox. Yeah, I'm not sure that it's available in the book format. I translated it a few years ago, so I'll just put it on the Dropbox. Anyway, I ran out of things to say. Have you got any questions?
I was just thinking, if somebody's my enemy, I was thinking, there are times when you're actually really nice to them and you want nice things to happen to them, because while they're happy, they're not hurting you.
Mm. Yeah.
So that's kind of a mix of that. It's like putting that in a blender.
Well, it's more like you're happy about your enemies being in a good situations because, you're saying that because, it's almost like sounds, I'm not saying that it's negative, but it sounds like rather than being happy for them, you're happy for you.
Yes, it is negative.
Yeah.
Because I've thought through, that's one of the things I've thought through that I used to do,
Yeah.
And I used to think I was so good for thinking good things about them and wishing good things for them. But really it was only so they'd be nice to me or less angry to me.
I mean, it sounds like kind of a bit, you could say that, it sounds like, wishing others well with having a bit of invested in some self-interest. But then, when I think about it in relation to myself, then when I'm happy, I tend to harm others to a lesser degree. When I'm unhappy, I tend to be snappy with others or, unhappy with others. So, although it is with some invested interest, actually, maybe it's not a bad thing. Yeah, it's not a bad thing, if
The motivation is
Yeah.
selfish, but
Yeah.
the end result is actually beneficial to more people.
Yeah.
Maybe it's being selfishly wise or wisely selfish.
Perhaps not, we don't generate as much virtue.
I guess that you can think that you wish them to be happy or to be successful, in an unharmful way. So that first of all, they're happy, but also on top of that, so that they will not be harmful to others, to yourself and others. You can package them together in the same attitude.
Yeah, I always thought, like the way holiness doesn't get angry at the Chinese, instead he develops compassion for them. And obviously, as the Chinese became enlightened, they'd be a lot less harmed too as well.
Yeah.
So I think if you just think that about any enemy, maybe become enlightened, so that they could be a benefit towards sentient beings.
Yeah.
Then that's not a selfish motivation, that's nice. And yes, that's what harming you in the process as well, so that's a bonus.
Yeah, it's now when we think of the four immeasurables, may all sentient beings have happiness, and the cause of happiness. A few years ago, when I was attending teachings with Siddhar Rinpoche, he made that comment that says that it's not just wishing others to be happy and to have the cause of happiness in general. He said that you need to think of wishing them to have the perfect causes for happiness, the right causes for happiness, and also significant happiness, which means that you want to wish others to have better wisdom, better patience, better moralities. And then when you think about it in terms of systems that are unjust, like, for example, when you think of what's happening in China, then you don't just wish them to be happy, but you can think of how it'd be for a society to function well when there's no animosity between one another. There's no level of suspicion, when you do not fear that the system is going to collapse if someone is going to undermine your position. So in that sense, you wish others to be happy in having wisdom, in having morality, in having the sense of concern for others. So may others have happiness in this cause of happiness, and may they be free from suffering in the cause of suffering, which is addressing exactly the same things, may they be free from ignorance, from the sense of superiority, from the sense of suspicion, from the sense of controlling, from the sense of partiality. So it would be not only good on a personal level, but if you think of a society or community that will function as having that as just the common ground, it'd be just amazing. It's like living in a utopic world. Yeah, bring it on, definitely. All right. Let's leave it here for now. And quickly become Guru, Lord Buddha, and lead each and every sentient being to his enlightenment end because of this merit. May this bring true bodhicitta, which is not a reason to rise and grow, and may that which is a reason never diminish, but increase more and more. In this land encircled by snowy mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. Path, fortune, rising, cleansing guides of bliss, remaining to some sorrow, and subdues more away, and shares bountiful birth, preserving and spreading into Gnostic Taoist doctrine, masterfully accomplishes magnificent prayers on the three Jewels. Protect of myself and others, your disciples. Please, please live long.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Carson.
Happy birthday, Graham.
We'll have a cake for you.
Yeah, we'll have a cake for you.
I'm having a cake tonight. My wife cooked one for me today, she told me.
Oh. So how many candles should we burn? Like 60, 70?
You need a forest, so just one candle will be fine.
All right.
He said in the discussion group, the shorter it's younger than he is, right? Dan?
Thank
About
you.
the number of hairs on your head.
Happy birthday, eh?
That'd be very short candles.
Yeah.
No,